Lawrence. Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm the Director of Justice Arts Coalition, and I'm your panel moderator. And I'm supposed to tell you, we're going to sit up here for a little bit because Monty, who developed the exhibition, is going to be calling in and having a conversation. And while he's on the phone, everyone can just stare at us. And we can just sit here and be cute and be awkward. So that's what we're going to do.
It's you.
Probably you.
It's you. Sit by
Next
me.
to Amy,
Sit by
I guess. This is Amy. Have you met?
No. I think Wendy's sitting there.
I'm sitting here. Supposedly we're getting water.
Someone has to sit next to me.
Well, thank you.
And then we'll put waters to the side of your chair. You can't really reach that. You know you're going to fall on this.
I mean, if I get that, before I get to that one, I'll tell you that.
This thing keeps falling. Do you have one of these?
No. You're on the call and everything else. You got all the duties.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Callie Hawkins, and I'm the Executive Director of President Lincoln's Cottage. We are so thrilled to welcome you all here this evening as we officially open Prison Reimagined. For those of you who are new to President Lincoln's Cottage, this is the home of Abraham Lincoln and where he and his family spent 1/4 of his presidency. And it was here in an upstairs bedroom, actually right above where we are and where many of you have visited this evening, where Lincoln nurtured and developed his bold ideas around the Emancipation Proclamation. Today we operate as a museum and historic site dedicated in all of the work we do, not to the mythical Lincoln on a pedestal, but instead to revealing the true Lincoln in all of his humanity, his failures, and we really like to continue what he called the unfinished work. And that's in large part why we're all here this evening, to pick up on ideas where Lincoln and both his predecessors and successors have fallen short. On behalf of our entire team at President Lincoln's Cottage, I want to thank the Justice Arts Coalition and especially the Committee of Incarcerated Artists and Writers for trusting the Cottage to be the vessel for this profound and consequential installation. We are so grateful. We are grateful and humbled that the public gets to experience the work of these extraordinary artists and writers at this place. I also want to express our deep gratitude to Cottage, who reached out to me nearly 2 years ago with this idea. I was completely blown away by it on paper and even more so by being able to experience it in person. I am so honored that his bold and brave idea brings us all here tonight, and I have the distinct honor of turning the microphone over now to Cottage.
That's the number of people released from American state and federal prisons every week. 2 million. That's how many people are behind bars in our country. 3 million children have an incarcerated parent in the United States. 18 million people have a prior felony conviction. And 1/5, 20% of the population in our country have a criminal record. In the United States, we incarcerate at a rate higher than any other industrialized country in the world. And it's not even close. While we have 5% of the world's population, the United States has 25% of the world's incarcerated population. My name is Cottage. Can everybody hear me? If you can hear me, just say hello.
Hello.
Excellent. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I am speaking to you from my prison cell in North Carolina. I am incarcerated at Nash Correctional Institution. I've been at this camp about 8.5 years. And before I tell you a little bit about myself in this camp, I want to go through some thank yous because if I don't do it now, I'll probably forget the details. Callie, thank you so much for the introduction. And everyone at Lincoln Cottage, thank you all so much, Callie, Cameron, Rebecca. We have The community of incarcerated artists and writers that connected with the museum program associates there, give tours, and we have had a dialogue back and forth with incarcerated individuals and the people that give the tours there, and it has been fantastic. And I thank you guys all so much. Everyone at Justice Arts Coalition, Wendy, Jason, thank you so much. Maya, Shani, Jamie Ritter, especially Jamie Ritter. I told somebody a couple days ago, I said, if I am the right hand of this project, Jamie Ritter is the left hand of this project. But I think that there is a better metaphor, and I think the metaphor is that if the Committee of Incarcerated Artists and Writers are the four fingers that are the ideas of this project, Jamie has been the thumb and allowed us to grab the things that we needed to get this project done. So Jamie, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm at Nash Correctional Institution. This prison was built in the 90s during a building boom in our country of prison. It was built to hold about 500 people. When I came here 8.5 years ago, it had 640 people. Now, in the last year and a half, they've increased the population of the camp to about 900 people. Let me tell you that if a state says that they are closing prisons, it may not be because they're reducing the population. It may be because they are doubling people up. And so now we are way above capacity here. But one thing about this camp, while there are not a lot of programs offered here, for some reason this camp has been a magnet over the years for talented writers and talented artists. And we have a couple of programs here at this camp that were just proposed, and the ideas came from incarcerated people. And one of them is the Nash Art Club. It's about to enter its 15th year. It was just proposed by an artist here. It's been free for years, but the Nash Art Club continues, and there are some amazing artists here. And the other is a quarterly magazine that is entirely produced by incarcerated people, written, edited, designed by people here at Nash Correctional, and it's called the Nash News, and I'm a writer for the Nash News. Now, 3 years ago, I was sitting in my prison cell, and I had just watched President Biden's inauguration, and I will tell you that I was on fire. We had just endured 4 years of Trump, and in my mind were all the possibilities that might come with this new administration. I listened to poet Amanda Gorman. She read her poem, The Hill We Climb, and there were words in that poem that really got right to the heart of how I feel about this country. One of the lines that she said, "We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always justice." And I said, man, that is how I feel. That's how I feel about our country. And so I was really jazzed up. Obama was there. I mean, I was jazzed up, to tell you the truth. So I had already read the Biden campaign platform, and I knew what he intended to do with criminal justice when he got into office. He said he was going to put financial incentives out for states to reduce their incarceration rates. He was going to eliminate mandatory minimums. He said he would cut incarceration numbers in our country in half.
This call will be monitored and recorded.
That's going to happen every now and then. He said he was going to develop better youth programs in our communities and in the schools to prison pipeline. So I was jazzed up. Staff from the Marshall Project, who does reporting about incarceration in America, the Marshall Project said that Biden has run on the most progressive criminal justice platform of any major party candidate in generations. So I just knew there was about to be serious change with mass incarceration in America. And let me tell you, if you hang out at Lincoln Cottage anytime over the next 6 weeks, between now and February 19th, you're likely to hear that term, mass incarceration, a few times. So even more, though, than having read his platform, I thought Joe Biden was going to use the presidency to rewrite his legacy and reverse some of the long-standing effects of the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, better known as the 1994 Crime Bill, and sometimes called the Biden Crime Bill, even by Joe Biden himself. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with the 94 Crime Bill, let me give you a quick rundown. The 94 Crime Bill was primarily authored by then Senator Joe Biden. And it brought us things like mandatory minimum, truth in sentencing policy, increased use of the death penalty. It brought us more prisons. There was incentive money for the states to build more prisons, like the one I'm in now that's built in the 90s. And while the 94 crime bill is not solely responsible for mass incarceration in our country, it was certainly a tipping point, accelerating mass incarceration, putting in place penalties that were so extreme that we still feel the effects of these 30 years later. Let me give you an idea. Mass incarceration, the era of mass incarceration, really started about 1971, 1972 with Nixon's war on drugs. But back in 72, in the United States, we only imprisoned 93 people per 100,000. In 2023, the United States, we imprisoned 565 people per 100,000. And my state here in North Carolina locks up 617 per 100,000. So over that 30-year span, we're talking about a 7-fold increase in incarceration. And that wasn't the only reason that bill was pushed and signed into law by then President Clinton. The other reason is, a couple years before that, the Republicans had painted the Democratic Party as soft on crime. And the Democrats wanted to wrestle that moniker back away from the Republican Party. And let me tell you something. In our country, when you hear politicians talk about a return to law and order and tough on crime policy, that is code. That's code for a lot of people that are poor and a lot of people of color are about to go to prison. That's what that means. So Biden wrote it and he fought for it and Clinton signed it. And one thing that Biden bragged about is he wanted to put 100,000 new uniformed police officers on the streets of America to crack down on the crime problem. So that's what happened in 94. We still feel the effects today. But I'm back in my room in 2021, and I just watched the inauguration, and I'm still on fire. And I know Biden's going to use the administration to address some of these things. And I'm sitting in my cell, and I have this improbable idea. What if we invited incarcerated men and women from around the country to draw portraits of our leaders, and then we invited those leaders to come look at what we had drawn? And I knew that this would be a powerful vehicle, a voice, a way that we could express our position in the conversation of mass incarceration. And here's why that's important, because people are always having this conversation, advocates, educators, politicians, activists, abolitionists. But who is rarely included in this conversation are the people at zero, the incarcerated themselves. I thought, man, I got something here. We could get some writers to add some commentary to it. And I kind of sat back like I had done something. And then I thought, this really isn't that good of an idea, I said. So I looked out of my cell, and I looked down onto the floor of the prison, and I saw a buddy of mine, Richard. He's a fantastic artist, and Richard and I always talk about art and politics. And I said, I'm going to go down here and talk to Richard, and I'm going to tell him my idea. And he's going to tell me that he doesn't think it's that good of an idea, and then I can take this notion and put it to rest. Let me tell you something about prison. In prison, if you have an idea, there is no shortage of people waiting to tell you that your idea stinks. They may not even be involved in your conversation, but they will happily lean in and just let you know, man, that's the worst idea I ever heard in my life. It is hard to get support sometimes for ideas in prison, and if you have a good idea, or maybe even a great idea, it may be hard to get support for that. It's hard to come across encouragement, and it's just something about the culture in here, and it is unfortunate. So I go downstairs and I tell my buddy Richard, I think that we should invite incarcerated men and women from across the country to draw presidential portraits.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I'm going to be dialing back, and that we have incarcerated writers from across the country to put their commentary in, and Richard looks at me and he says, I think that is a great idea and you should pursue it. And that's when Prison Reimagined was born. Callie, if you'll take the mic for about 2 minutes, and I'll call right back.
While we wait for Cadell to call back, I do want to mention one thing. In here we have a big yellow rack that has a lot of writing excerpts, and it has some small portraits of Reagan and also Clinton. Those portraits of Reagan and Clinton are meant to be big. They are still in the mail, as is the nature of this work. I'm sure many of you know. The artist in particular had a very, very difficult time getting his paintings actually mailed out from his facility. So they are currently in the mail as of right now. We were hoping, crossing our fingers, that they would get here, but hopefully they will arrive here soon safely. So I encourage you. They were the second most highest voted out of all of the committees. So I very highly encourage you to look at those small versions and try and make it out as best you can. And then come back if you're local, see them in person. Cadell should be calling back within the next minute or so.
There's one chair up there in the sun.
There's space too if some of y'all who are out
And there's
there,
three
like
chairs
there's
over
3
here.
chairs here,
It's
there's
really
a chair
bothering
here.
me, just as a person.
There's a floor over here. Come in.
It's killing me. I'm like, there's a room full of people and it's 3 chairs and I don't understand. Thank you.
It's okay to pile in.
Okay, Monty, you're back.
Making phone calls.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Just say hello if you can.
Hi.
So,
Making a phone call from prison is a process, just so you know. So before I jump back in too, I want to say hello to my mom and my sister that made the trip up from North Carolina. Brenda Kivett is out there, and that's my mom. It's Joe Mackin. I love you guys. I had just told my friend Richard my idea, and he looked at me and he said, I think it's a great idea, and I knew at that point Prison Reimagined Presidential Portrait Project was born, and I knew I had to pursue this. Now, as I told you guys earlier, I used to be the editor for the Nash News. Now I'm just a writer, no less prestigious. I used to be the editor for the Nash News, and we had done a feature on Justice Arts Coalition in our magazine, and in turn, they had done a feature on our magazine on their website. And who I reached out to, and if you don't know who the Justice Arts Coalition is, what they do is they're a nonprofit that connects incarcerated artists and writers with accesses and resources and mentors, and they connect them with their web and their network to help them improve their work and get their work out there. And they also connect all of us in our shared humanity. So that's what the Justice Arts Coalition does. And so I reached out to Wendy Jason, founder of Justice Arts Coalition. I wrote her a letter and I said, Wendy, I've got this idea for a project. We're going to have incarcerated artists and writers draw portraits of our president and invite everyone to come see them, and we will make commentary, and this will be our voice. And Wendy, I think you and I share some common goals and a common vision, and would you partner with this project? And Wendy took a call, and we decided to partner for this.
This call will be monitored and recorded.
But of course, here at the prison, I can't do it alone either. So I looked around at all the talented men here at this camp, and I put together a committee of artists and writers to help me work this end of it. And so the Committee of Incarcerated Artists and Writers joined with Justice Arts Coalition to do this project. Now, let me tell you something that I did not know when I first reached out to Wendy, and she had already agreed that we were going to move forward. You could have showed me a map of Maryland and asked me where Silver Spring, Maryland was, which is where Justice Arts Coalition was at that time, and I could not have told you. But after Wendy said yes, I looked at a map and I saw that Silver Spring, Maryland was D.C. adjacent. It is what you locals would say, it's in the DMV. It's right there in the nation's capital. And I thought, man, if we were going to do a project for incarcerated artists and writers from across the country, drew presidential portraits, and they included commentary that would act as our voice, and we wanted to invite politicians and educators and abolitionists and activists and advocates all to see it, where would be better to do it than in our nation's capital? So when I realized where Justice Arts Coalition was located, serendipity. That's what I thought. This was meant to be. What could be better than that? Well, I'll tell you what could be better than that. That is having a place like Lincoln's Cottage agree to be the host. We took a meeting, Callie Hawkins and a group from Lincoln's Cottage, and much like I am now, I rambled for 30 minutes in my cell with some ideas. I couldn't even tell if anybody was listening on the other end. And later that afternoon, Callie reached back out, and she told us, hey, we want to do this project. And so that's what could be better. We partner with Justice Arts, and they're right there in the DMV. And then we get Lincoln Cottage to come on, a National Historic Museum. That was the summer retreat of one of the most consequential presidents in the history of our country. Callie told me on that phone call, I think I said something like, this was just an idea I had. And Callie told me, ideas become things. Around the cottage, we say, ideas become things. Callie, thank you for saying that. The encouragement I've received along the way of putting this project together has been what has kept it going. But that's not the only connection that makes Lincoln Cottage so significant. The other connection that makes it so significant is that our modern prison system, our modern criminal punishment system, trace their roots to the slavery of the 1800s. Now you'll say, how can this be? That doesn't make sense. But it does, and I'll give you a short rundown. There is so much information on this, and I encourage everybody to fact check everything I'm saying, because if I can get you in this information, then you'll be better equipped for what we're trying to do. So Lincoln starts the ball rolling January 1st, 1863, by signing the Emancipation Proclamation. And I just wanted to say, too, at that signing, Lincoln said, and this is on the wall there at the cottage, he said, if my name ever goes down in history, it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it. Well, at the inauguration 3 years ago, Biden said the same words. He invoked Lincoln in the name of unity for our country. Those are some big shoes to fill and a big quote. So, January 1st, 1863, Emancipation Proclamation. 2 years later, 13th Amendment, 1865. Then the war is over and we've entered Reconstruction. And now you have all the slaves know they're free, Juneteenth has happened, and now you have rich white plantation owners without their free and cheap labor. And remember, back then, the rich landowners were also the politicians. And so what happened in the South specifically is municipalities and legislatures create laws that intentionally target black people, vagrancy laws, black codes. And these are for the point of social and racial control, but they served another purpose, because the 13th Amendment, when ratified, still reads the same in our country. While it did end legal slavery and involuntary servitude, there's a loophole. And the loophole is slavery and involuntary servitude are still legal if you have been duly convicted of a crime. So vagrancy laws that don't make sense and black codes that target black bodies, we criminalize black bodies. And in just a few short years, many of the same generation and the next generation of recently freed slaves are back on these same plantations doing the same thing, but we just call it something different. Now they're convicts. It's not just that simple. So we go emancipation, 13th Amendment, Reconstruction, vagrancy laws, black codes.
This call will be monitored and recorded.
Then around the turn of the century, and we enter into convict leasing, because there's all these different things that look the same, but they're called something different. But ultimately, they mean control of poor and black people and free labor. That's what these things equal. So convict leasing, it lasted up until the 50s and 60s in some places in our country. And convict leasing, in many cases, was considered worse than slavery. Because with slavery, the plantation owner felt as if they owned property, and so they maintained it more so. But with convict leasing, the state leased convicted felons to work on farms or to work on the railroad or to work in whatever private industry they worked in. And the private business owner had one goal, and that was extract as much profit out of a body, often at the expense of health and often to the point of death. So that lasted into the middle of last century. And then Jim Crow laws. And so all these things in succession, Emancipation, 13th Amendment, Reconstruction, vagrancy laws, black codes, convict leasing, Jim Crow. And so this is the string of laws that the names changed, but things stayed somewhat the same. But let me tell you some places where the names even stayed the same, and the game was the same. Here in North Carolina, there's a prison called Caledonia. Back in the 1860s, it was called Caledonia Plantation. It was about 10,000 acres, just under 10,000 acres. Had about 273 slaves. Well, they changed the name last year because it had negative overtones. But up until 2023, it was Caledonia Prison Work Barn. I've been there. And what it is so all these years later, 150 years later, we have state prison work barns with the same name as the one-time plantation. And what they do there is so much the same. And I'll give you another example, Angola in Louisiana. It's also called Louisiana State Prison, but State Penitentiary, but everybody calls it Angola. It was Angola Plantation. It was a slave plantation. Parchment Farm in Mississippi. So this is the connection. This is the connection. Often, prisons have been used to extract labor. Now, that's not the whole story, and there's a lot to it, but that is part of the story. And it's interesting that those plantations still exist in that same form. Once you realize the parallels between prison today and the plantation of the 50s, or the prisons of the 1920s, the similarities are too many to ignore. Now, prisons are insular systems, so change happens at such a slow pace that it is, unless something is such an extreme, egregious violation of civil rights, that prisons just move on. And many of the traditions here in North Carolina for prisons are the same as they were 100 years ago. So not a lot has changed. So look, I'm running out of time, and I want to make a couple points before I completely run out of time. The main point is, it is time to acknowledge and act upon the fact that continuing to cage people as a response to harm in our country is not making us safer, and it's not making us better as a nation. There's plenty of evidence out there that long prison sentences do not deter crime. What it does is it destroys communities. Prisons are violent, and addressing violence with violence simply doesn't work. We need to stop pouring money into prison and police reform and instead divert resources into the most needy communities. We can't continue to simply throw money at failing ideas. Our criminal punishment systems are broken beyond repair. We've got to imagine a new way of addressing harm, and a new way that's not rooted in vengeance, not rooted in violence, and not rooted in racial and social control. It's time to reimagine justice. It's time to imagine methods of transformative justice rooted in community and rooted in our shared humanity.
Yeah.
Let me read one excerpt real quick. This is exhibition. As many advocates have pointed out, the distinction between survivors and perpetrators of violence is largely illusory, as virtually no one commits violence without first surviving it. Reflexively locking people in cages and subjecting them to degradation and humiliation, inflicting violence and suffering upon people in order to teach them that violence is wrong, is a doomed strategy.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Especially considering that most people who commit violent crime are victims as well. If we want to reduce violence in our community, we need to hold people accountable, and we do, in ways that aim to repair and prevent harm rather than simply inflicting more harm and trauma and calling it justice. Now, right after the 30-second notice, I'm going to read one more line.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
This is one more line from a Bandit Woman's poem, and it sums everything up perfect. And thank you guys so much. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the path we step into and how we repair it. Hey, thank you guys so much. I hope you get so much done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Janie, for facilitating that call for us. Y'all, Janie Ritter right here has been working with... started with Justice Arts Coalition 2021. Summer 21 as an intern. Has now completely brought this project to fruition as the project manager of it and a programs assistant for the organization. Janie, I'm so incredibly proud of you and so blown away by what you've done. Thank you. Does he want to? All right, Cadell. My name is Wendy Jason. I'm the founder and executive director of Justice Arts Coalition. Is my mic okay? Am I, all right, cool. No? What? I don't know if I can talk louder, but I'll try. It is such an honor to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking in all of the artwork in this space. Thank you to everyone at Lincoln's Cottage. Callie, it's a pleasure to work with you again. After 4 years, we had one of our first exhibitions here in this space back in early 2020, right before the pandemic, and a lot has changed with our organization. The cottage looks the same. The artwork looks incredible, and you have an amazing team here, so thank you. I have the pleasure of hosting this panel tonight. I will be your moderator, so I know we're short on time. I think, okay, so I know I'm supposed to say that the views expressed by the individual panelists I'm sorry, are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the organization. I did that. And now I'll introduce our esteemed panelists. Sitting next to me is Amy Wisman. Amy and I go back a few years. Amy began her artistic practice in Ohio's maximum security prison for women. In spaces of trauma, confinement, and disconnection, she found herself reaching for the tools for self-expression. She taught herself to draw and paint over the course of 5 years inside, and now, after 6 at home, she is absolutely a phenomenal artist. I think you probably both know. Amy's practice relies heavily on experimentation, material concerns, surface obsession, and the interconnected narratives of racism, sexism, mass incarceration, privilege, community, creation, and destruction, addiction, homelessness, and mental health. She's driven by a longing for justice, a need to make something come from her, your, our trauma, and to be perhaps released in the making. Always proud to sit next to Amy.
It's an old bio.
That's a long bio.
Lawrence.
Yes, that's me.
Lawrence Bartley is the publisher of the Marshall Project Inside. The Marshall Project's publications are intended specifically for incarcerated audiences. Inside is, yes. He's also the host and executive producer of Inside Story, a new video series delivering trustworthy reporting to incarcerated folks and the broader public. He's served as the founder and director of News Inside, the print publication of the Marshall Project, which is distributed in hundreds of prisons and jails throughout the U.S. News Inside received the 2020 Izzy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Independent Media. Lawrence was a member of the team behind The Zoe, winner of the 2021 Edward R. Murrow Award for Excellence and Innovation, and recipient of an Emmy nod in the area of news and documentary. He's also an accomplished public speaker and has provided multimedia content for CNN, PBS, NBC Nightly News, MSNBC, and more. And Abe Bonowitz is the co-founder and executive director of Death Penalty Action, a national organization that works to stop executions and abolish the death penalty through advocacy, education, and action.
Yes.
Death Penalty Action leads a coalition of nearly 500 organizations united to oppose federal executions and to get the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act through Congress and onto President Biden's desk so that Biden can fulfill his campaign pledge to abolish the federal death penalty.
Yeah.
Abe traveled from Columbus, Ohio. Amy also traveled from Ohio to be with us tonight. Did you come from Ohio? You didn't?
New York.
All right. To be with us tonight, and he's been working with Yuri Katimov, one of the artists who created the portrait right here behind us, to help humanize the people facing execution by the federal government. Death Penalty Action is also hosting Yuri's campaign to end solitary confinement on the federal death row. Abe, I believe you're going to be reading Yuri's statement, right? And should we start
I
with
guess
that?
I have the microphone on me, so I can start.
Let's do it, and then I'll ask y'all a question or two. How about that?
I had a few thoughts to share as well, if that's okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you all very much. I want to say that being here, my name is Abe, and my whole life, I say my name is Abe, and people say, oh, Abe Lincoln, and here we are. So, and that's been happening over and over again just today, so I'm grateful. I want to invite our panelists to just step aside here so we can all see this image that is created. The Obama portrait was created in collaboration by 3 artists on federal death row, which is in Terre Haute, Indiana. Yuri Katimov, a Lithuanian citizen who claims innocence, Akila Barnett, an African-American from the South, and Lesmond Mitchell, a Navajo citizen. Inspired by then-President Obama's message of hope and change, the artists created the piece within the rigid constraints of solitary confinement. Never inhabiting the same space, as they shared ideas and contributed to the piece, it took ingenuity to make this project a reality. The artists slid canvases under the steel door of their respective one-man cells and handed it off to the inmate worker who would pass the artwork to the next collaborator in line. The artists had hoped that President Obama would inform the criminal justice system and grant clemency to their death-sentenced community. But when that changed, when the change that they believed in failed to materialize, Obama granted only one clemency petition to someone in their situation. Hope faltered and crashed. Change, which they had hoped for, turned out to be an illusion, a mirage, and a disappointment. The change that had come from a worsening of mental health and executions under the next president, Lesmond Mitchell, who incorporated the motifs in the Obama portrait, was actually executed under the Trump administration. How many people here are aware that Donald Trump had 13 executions in the last 6 months of his term as president, becoming the most executing president since Roosevelt, who had 16 executions over the course of 13 years, and the first president since the 1880s to execute during the transition period. And he's foaming at the mouth and just chomping at the bit to kill more. There's a piece in the hall upstairs. Look at that. Okay. Lesmond Mitchell was executed on the Wednesday of the Republican National Convention in August of 2020. And I'll never forget that night because I was there in Terre Haute. We were doing demonstrations outside the prison around each of those executions. And you had this Republican National Convention where they had the vice president and the president of the Navajo Nation speaking during this convention. And I kept waiting. It was criminal justice night that Thursday night. I had my phone on to try to catch Donald Trump saying something about the death penalty, but he never said a word about it after that first execution. So much more that I could talk about. But I do want to take the opportunity, since we're talking about Lesmond Mitchell, one of the creators of this piece, a Native American, the only Native American that was on federal death row, to note that President Lincoln, on his watch, oversaw the largest mass execution in the history of this country. 38 Dakotans hung at the same time on a special scaffold created December 26, 1862. And President Lincoln allowed that to happen. But I want to say, because of our host noted, the anguish that he must have felt and the troubles that he must have had, he actually commuted 87% of the sentences there. There were 303 people that had been sentenced to be executed as a result of atrocities, alleged atrocities committed during the U.S.-Dakota War that year, 1862. So, just noting that. I want to note also that Yuri called me earlier today to say how grateful he was to each and every one of you. Every time he calls me, he never wants to talk about his own case. He's got lawyers, he's got diplomats working on it. He wants to talk about his art. He wants people to see this art. Google him, look at his webpage, and also remember this. The name of the organization is Death Penalty Action. So if you can remember action, we're asking people to take action, right? deathpenaltyaction.org. That's where you go to sign Yuri's petition to end solitary confinement on federal death row, as well as petitions about the upcoming executions, including the first gas chamber execution in this country scheduled for 2 weeks from tonight in Alabama, including so many other things where we can take action to try to do something. And lastly, I'll say there's something we could talk about with every single one of these presidents that are pictured on the walls and so many more. I keep looking for the opportunity to say the name Ricky Ray Rector in front of Bill Clinton because he took time off from his campaign to go home to Arkansas and execute a guy that didn't understand what was about to happen to him. As they took him out of his cell to be executed, they say, Ricky, you didn't eat your pie in his last meal. And he said, I'm going to come back and eat that after the execution. That's who we're killing in this country. Okay? And again, so much more I could say, but before I stop, I do want to make sure to introduce my colleague, Charles Keith here, who is the brother of Kevin Keith, who is the face of the 1994 Biden crime bill. When Bill Clinton went to Ohio in February of 1994, is that the right year? While he was giving his remarks in front of a whole bunch of police officers, he said, and we're arresting Kevin Keith. I don't know if he named his name, but they murders. Yeah, they were. So Kevin Keith is innocent. You can go and listen to Kim Kardashian's podcast, The System, that spells all out about that. But it's Joe Biden and the crime bill that is what's keeping Kevin Keith and so many other people in prison. So much more I can say. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes?
Yuri's on the phone.
Oh, Yuri's on the phone.
Yeah, right now.
Yuri's on the phone. Let's get the microphone again.
We do.
Hey, bring it on up here.
Hold on. You'll be talking in 1 second. Hold on.
Just put it on the speakerphone. Hey, Yuri, it's Abe. Go ahead.
Hello, Abe. Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Yuri Kazanov. I'm calling you from Federal Death Row in Terre Haute, Indiana. How are you doing over there?
We're all great.
Hey, Yuri.
So, first of all, I would like to thank you to Vanity, to Lincoln Cottage, to all team that hosting this event. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I also would like to thank you for all the Justice Art Coalition team who organized this event, justice system, all the unfairness. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. I honestly wasn't have a plan to interrupt this event. I'm so sorry. So I just want to say thank you and enjoy the artworks, and I hope we make some changes in the future, and politicians will be here from people who doing those portraits, who working on art in such a conditions like myself in solitary confinement. And I just appreciate it to everyone. So thank you, Adi. Please continue.
Thank you, Yuri.
Mary, thank you so much, and I told them all about how gracious and grateful you are, so thank you.
Thank you for facilitating that. Go ahead. Thank you, Abe.
Of course, and just as for reassembling, I will share that on the table by the door are, while they last, buttons and stickers and things, and I invite you to take them and wear them. And when somebody says, hey, I like your button, take it off, give it to them, and then put on another one. Keep it moving. Thank you.
Thank you. So Amy. Amy.
You're supposed to go in order.
Why do I have to go in? I don't do things in order. Not
put this
logical.
on.
Oh. Well, either of you.
All right.
Talk to us a little bit about your background, how you came into this work, and maybe a little about how you see the arts being used as a tool for raising awareness around the prison industrial complex, around mass incarceration and abolition, and like how you've used your work, your art, your writing.
Just an easy
to do
question. Just a softball.
You've heard this question about 500 times, I know, because I've seen it.
So thank you for reading my bio. I'm sorry I didn't send you an updated one. So aside from being a visual artist, I am the co-founder of the Returning Artists Guild, which is a abolitionist network of artists in Ohio that are either currently still inside or have been released. And the guild is made up of visual artists, poets, writers, dancers, musicians, etc. And really it was just born out of, I guess, my experience inside. I want to say this is a huge honor to be in Lincoln's Cottage and to be on a panel saying I'm an abolitionist. I don't think that's the dream I had for my life maybe as a child, but I am really grateful ultimately for the road. Yeah, so I did 5 years, and a lot of that time was in Max, and I had a 1-year-old daughter when I first went to prison, so art making for me was initially about connection and having something to send in the mail, and then it became a way to support myself a little bit and like a hustle. And during the process of making, I just kept having the experience that other people wanted to join in and that they wanted to make too, and that all of us had a lot of shit to say that we couldn't talk about. And slowly but surely, I was one of the people that started an art therapy program in prison, and there was always a woman inside that would say after every class, like, I didn't feel like I was in prison when I was here today. And I just saw the power of the arts to unlock all of these, not only places of pain, but also this really deep knowledge. And I am convinced that we are the experts in the room, and also that I don't want to see any more experts. Like, I just want to be the last. And to Cadell's point, you know, prison was where I learned a lot about intersectional feminism. It's where I learned a lot about the new Jim Crow. It's where I understood how, you know, slavery has shape-shifted over time to include faces like mine, but that's not what it was designed for, right? And deeply understanding that helps me unpack what a free future could look like. And through this Guild of Artists, we've been curating exhibitions and trying to build a peer-driven model of reentry, and we've gotten funding from the Art for Justice Fund and the Mellon Foundation and the Sozoze Foundation. So the heat is really, really on for us to become as professional as we want to be, I guess. But it's really been life-changing. Like, I don't know. I can't imagine myself doing any other kind of work, and I think that in terms of the landscape or like helping people understand what is mass incarceration or what is the criminalization of mental illness or poverty, like art has this way of making things understandable and communicating in a language that I think we all understand. And then also that imaginary piece, artists have always been at the forefront of social change. We've always been the ones to imagine new futures and new designs and new ways of doing things. And so I think when you have people that have all the expertise of being directly impacted and they're artists, that person just needs a platform, maybe some financial support, maybe an exhibition, because they have the juice. So I'm here to just like continue to uplift everyone in my community as I try to, make a career for myself as an artist as well.
Cool.
No, pass.
Lawrence, you want to talk a little bit about your work with Marshall Project and what brought you to it and the impact that you see it making?
Yes, well, I began with the Marshall Project about 5 years ago. I wrote a piece about parole, how difficult it was to obtain parole despite, making transformations. And it was published by the Marshall Project. And maybe a month after that, they invited me into their offices. We did brown bags, which was when we had an expert come in to talk about a particular thing. And that was before the pandemic, before Zoom was popular. We had people all across the country. Folks was on the screen in Zoom. Staff was in the conference room. And I was the expert about parole at that time in New York State. I discussed parole at length, and then, a few days later they asked me if I wanted a job there. I began working there, and maybe shortly after, 90 days later, I created the print publication. It's now distributed in over 1,350 prisons and jails across 48 states. And then years later, created the video series, which I host. And it's in each segment of the video series either touched by or either touched by someone currently or formerly incarcerated. Even the opening music done by formerly incarcerated individuals. In the print publication, we published what's called Life in Size, which is a series of essays written by people who are impacted by the system. It could be judges, it could be lawyers, parole commissioners, but 95% of them are written by people who are currently incarcerated. And when they write those, and the ones that lends itself to animation, we animate those and put them in each episode of Inside Story. And it's a way for incarcerated people to earn money while they're incarcerated. For their essays, we pay them for it. And we pay them for the animations. And in many cases, some of them are released, and they become the voiceovers for the animations, and they get paid for that as well. So we love to continue that trend. And it's a way to raise awareness about incarceration, what people go through on the inside, and it's also we are folks who don't know about the Marshall Project. We're named after Thurgood Marshall. We've been around for 9 years now. The youngest organization to win a Pulitzer Prize. We won, not bragging on us a little bit. we won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. We came in second twice as well, and we are the only major news organization in the country that not just writes about incarcerated people, we write for incarcerated people. So our stories are meant to raise awareness. We give statistics. We frequent the cover of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, et cetera, et cetera. The information is very reputable. Incarcerated people use it in order to help them win their cases, in order to gain parole, in order to propose prison programs that might be happening in Mississippi but not happening in D.C. They say, hey, I saw this in the Marshall Project on the side. Can we have that here? And et cetera, and et cetera. And it's a way to lift people up, and I'm glad to be able to be leading this work.
I need to do a time check.
7:54.
Thank you. got, I think, 5 minutes. So I'm curious, this is not on the list of notes that I'm looking at, but I'm just curious about your reflections as you walked through this space. I know, Abe, you've been here for several hours. You were here when I got here at 4 o'clock this afternoon, so I imagine you've taken in a lot of the work. I don't know how much of a chance you two have gotten to like really take it in, but what does it feel like for you as you walk through the space? What comes up for you? What does it evoke? And what are your hopes for an exhibition like this? All of you, any of you?
Abe, you go first. You had the most time.
Well, you know, what speaks to me most is the disappointment and the hopelessness that is evoked in some of this. Notably, there's a piece on the wall upstairs about, it's a picture of Joe Biden, and anybody can change is one of the themes of it, which I thought was remarkable because it talks about how criminal Joe Biden's policies are. I do want to say, you know, he's committed to abolishing the federal death penalty, but he can't do so without us getting a bill on his desk for him to sign. So that's why we've got the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act. And again, you can send a letter to your Congress people through the webpage there. But in terms of that hopelessness, it's one of the things I did want to mention tonight is that, you know, the prisoners on federal death row and across this country are watching this presidential race as it shapes up, right? And they understood, you know, all through that execution spree, that federal execution spree, every Friday night up until about September of 2020, they were all looking over their shoulder, waiting for that tap that the warden wants to come and see you. Because they initially started with 5 prisoners, they ended up with 13. And when the warden wants to see you, you never come back to your community, you go to Death Watch, right? And they're watching that. And this is an important time to stand because on December 1st, I'll make sure I get this name right, he goes by Nassi Kamil Raid, or in his slave name, Odell Corley, killed himself on federal death row. Noting how desperate he was, how this is no way to live, and how much he has lost hope, and as a cry to be heard on behalf of the rest of the 40 or so individuals who remain on federal death row. So this is real, and desperation is real, and so too is the hope. You know, Yuri is one of the most hopeful people I've ever met. So too is our friend that's on the phone here, and a number of other death row prisoners that I hear from all the time. They have a vision of living, and at the same time, you know, the reality is one of the biggest damage that Donald Trump has done to this country is the appointment of court justices throughout the system. Because even if you can get a stay at a federal district court level, all the state has to do is go up to the circuit court, and if not at the circuit court, then up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And unless it's about getting your Christian spiritual advisor to be able to be in the death chamber for you, you're going to get a denial. That's our experience. That's what we're going to see in 2 weeks from tonight in Alabama. Sorry, that was a little bit more than you asked for. But
No, that was great.
Well, I could say that, you know, when looking around the room, the hopelessness definitely leaks out. It reminds me of the state of incarceration. There's so many people across the country that write me. I get 60 pieces of snail mail every week. I get countless calls, countless emails from family members that add on to that, and each of them want help with their cases for the most part. And it's tough to even respond to any of them, let alone help them, because I'm a journalist. I'm not a lawyer, but you know, I understand those conditions, and I feel like in doing in the video series, you know, there's many news programs that talk about incarceration in various ways, maybe podcasts, maybe magazines, but it never really gets it. It never really gets it right. So we aim to get a particular reaction from the incarcerated community, like, yeah, that's the real. That's exactly what I'm talking. That's what I never heard before. So we try to do that with every episode. It's always a few things that they say, I never heard that before. This is our reality. It never happens. But we don't try to inject that hopelessness that I see in the art. We try to give them hope. we try to give them hope that, people just like you created this video series. People just like you created this magazine. People just like you is giving you what you want, tools that you need to get yourself out of the situation and hope to change whatever criminality that may or may not have got you in there. Hope to change the way you see things so you can come out a better individual. So when I read that, like I see the piece from Kenneth Reams, he was on death row in Arkansas, but I think he's not on death row anymore.
Right.
But I see him still in the game trying to do a couple of things. And it's so many different artists around the room that I know from my work. I feel hopeful that they're doing something. Their work is in the world, and then people like you get to view it.
Thank you.
Supposed to follow that? I don't know. For me, I think something that the average person who's not been impacted directly by the criminal legal system probably doesn't realize the level of powerlessness that a person experiences, and the despair and the hopelessness that comes from that. And then also the little tiny sliver that still holds out, that believes in a long shot, that's like, maybe if I can get into Lincoln's Cottage, someone will listen. That piece is kind of what is resonating with me. And then also, I do think there is some hope, and the reason I know that is look how many Obama portraits there are. And I think that really says something about how many of us felt, when he was elected and when he was inaugurated. And I think it shows me like how thirsty we still are for, that dream.
Right.
And I think that dream is still very alive in a lot of us. But yeah, the political landscape has crushed, hope for many. And so I feel the despair, I feel the isolation, I feel the powerlessness, but I'm reminded of that little light. And I think that's why artists create, to create under the conditions of solitary confinement, even in a regular cell, it's not easy. So for me, there's something really, really profound that helps me hold on and understand that this creative piece that human beings have is super important. This is how we survive. And so I think there's some beauty in the heaviness that is definitely in this exhibition.
Thank you. And so we're here to nourish that, right, in whatever ways that we can. And thank you all for taking the time out of your evenings to be here. You'll notice, if you haven't already, there are notebooks around the building. Please share your thoughts and reflections in those. That all get sent to the artists. And that's what keeps that spark, that creative spark alive, right? I don't think any artist wants to work in a vacuum and not know how their work is making people feel, how it's impacting other people. So please, before you leave or before we get kicked out of here, take some time to, even if it's just one note, but the pieces that speak to you the most, right, to those artists. And we will make sure that those messages are conveyed. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to sit up here with you. One last, housekeeping thing. As you're leaving, there's a little table by the door that has some information about Justice Arts Coalition and President Lincoln's Cottage on it. There are also some QR codes. We're a nonprofit. We don't like it, but we need to have data. It's important. There's a survey. There's a paper survey. There's a QR code survey. If you could do that and let us know, how you're feeling leaving this exhibition, what this experience was like for you, that would be really helpful to us. There's another QR code that you might take note of on the sign by the door as well.
Can I just briefly interrupt Wendy and say that if anyone is in the position to support the work of the Justice Arts Coalition, it would mean a lot to me personally that you would. Not only am I now in the position of doing my own nonprofit, but I met Wendy probably 6 months after I got out of prison in a very kind of uncomfortable position for me, but big deal for arts and corrections in California. And it's people like Wendy that really solidified the idea in me that became a thing. So just expressing my gratitude and humbly saying if you can support Jack, please do.
I'd also just like to invite anyone who is local or who has friends and family who are local, please bring them back. Our team has worked really hard to get up to speed with the Committee of Incarcerated Artists and Writers to be able to share interpretation of this art in some ways. So please come back. You can find out information about how you can experience this daily on our website, lincolncottage.org. I also want to say a huge thank you to the President Lincoln's Cottage team for
Yes.
tonight and for all of the work that they have done on behalf of the cottage to get ready for this. So thank you to Jack. Thank you to you all. Monty, your idea became a thing. It's a thing I know will have a huge impact. So thank you so much for
I have
coming.
a question. How long is the exhibit going to be up?
Until February 19th.
Okay.
And it is so beautiful in here when the sunlight is pouring in the windows, and you'll see the art so much better. So please do come back during the day.
Sign Yuri's petition at
Sign Yuri's
deathpenaltyaction.org.
petition.
That's right.
Do it all.
Do it all.
Thank you.